Bum-ba-da-dum. Now we are live. Hello. At least I hope we're live. It's just really hard to tell, but I'm pretty sure we're live. There we go. Well, hello everyone. So thanks for joining my office hours. Yeah, I guess we just get started here. I guess I should probably do some sort of intro like do welcome and explain what this is for people new here. So let me share my screen. Bum-ba-da-dum. So office hours is your opportunity. Well, it's actually, to be frank, it is my opportunity to say to all the people who ask me questions, why don't you ask me that during office hours so that I don't get derailed, because I get nerd sniped really easily. It's really easy to derail my day with an interesting question. So I just say, go ask me during office hours. And now I've got an hour to answer questions from people. And yeah, so you can join the office hours with the Zoom link here. And if you want to see the links and everything that I share in the office hours right here, then you should do that. And I forgot, I need to notify folks about the office hours starting now. And here's the Zoom link. Oh, it's Thursday, so copy that. And yeah, and then if I share any links or anything, I'll do that here in the Discord. So you'll probably want to be in the Discord. This will be recorded at the URL that you're watching. If you're on YouTube, you're also like 15 seconds behind me. So yeah, there's the YouTube part is really just to have it recorded. Yeah, I think there was something. Oh yeah, and if nobody asks me any questions, then that's fine, because I realized that I have like this enormous number of questions that I have neglected over the last year, I think, that I could go through and answer questions here. So anyway, that's that. Anybody have questions?
I actually have one question.
Great.
It's regarding testing. So right now I'm writing some tests for my backend, and I've seen that, for example, like my current example would be I'm testing some secured routes, right, using JW tokens and all of that. But then I'm using an external service, Auth0 for that, and I don't want to hit their service every time I'm doing an integration test, for example.
Mm-hmm.
My question is there a time where unit tests are good enough without the integration test?
Well, is there a reason that your integration test has to hit their service? Like whatever you would do in your unit test would probably have to mock out Auth0 as well, right? And
Exactly.
so you could just do that with your integration test. So like the definitions are kind of funny, but an integration test here, I don't need to share my screen. Yeah, so the definitions are a little bit funny. Because like you'd say, well, an integration test, it's like I'm integrating with Auth0, but that's not necessarily the case. When I think about UI integration tests, I'm thinking about my UI components and testing their integration with each other. And I slice off anything that makes HTTP requests. So that's where I draw the line. And potentially if it's complicated enough to, because Auth0 is going to be making HTTP requests, and if those are complicated enough to mock at that layer, then you might just mock the Auth0 module that you're using. I haven't actually tried it myself with Auth0 specifically, so I can't tell you one way or the other. But either way, you could still do integration tests and mock out Auth0. Because you're right, you wouldn't want to actually hit their endpoints during your tests.
All right. Good enough for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I kind of interrupted you, so I apologize for that. Hopefully I was still able to answer your question.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Anyone else? Okay, sweet. I'm happy to answer questions, both spoken and unspoken, if somebody's here in the chat in Discord, which, by the way, I don't pay attention to the chat on Zoom. So if you chat something here, I'm not going to see it. I want it in Discord. So yeah, feel free to interrupt me as I go through and answer AMA questions. And if you have any thoughts or whatever, then you're more than welcome to share those. So I have...
At any point of time, do you need to hit the real DB in integration or end-to-end tests, like real backend services, or we have to mock out everything? I know we will mock out in unit test, but do we do the same thing in integration and end-to-end?
Yeah, great question. So I'll share my screen here because I want to show you a blog post. So I have a blog post. It's static versus unit versus integration. So this kind of speaks to all the different layers and what you do in those different layers. And so feel free to read through that. But basically, the way that I think about testing, especially with UIs, is integration just is testing the integration of all of your components together. And it severs the connection with any HTTP communication, WebSocket, anything from outside of the app. And so now I'm just testing the integration of the stuff within the app. And then end-to-end is like the full thing because you absolutely do not want to just have have confidence that your application works with itself. You want to make sure, or like that the front end works with itself. You want to make sure that the front end actually works with the back end as well. And so that's where you get that confidence from end-to-end testing. And so, yes, you absolutely will be hitting a real database with end-to-end testing. And then there's like tons of other things around this as well. And actually, I was just on a podcast, Software Unlocked podcast. It's Software Engineering Unlocked. And so I had an episode with them recently with Michaela. She's awesome. Recently about integration testing. And then just yesterday, I recorded a part 2. So the part 2 is coming out soon. Together we talk about different things that you can do with testing as well. Like what about testing in production, which makes me think of another resource for you. On my own podcast, Chats with Kent, I talk with Talia, who talks about testing in production. Really interesting ideas. So yeah, there are different layers of testing for getting you confidence, and I recommend exploring how they can help you get your confidence. Long-winded answer, but hopefully it answered the question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Good. And there's a question here in Discord. Do you have any written article on definitions of unit and integration testing? The blog post that I shared literally right above that is the one that gives those definitions. So give that one a look. Yeah, and that's that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, sweet. So I'm going to sort these by, let's see, oldest. And we'll see what that what that gets to us. Oh man, this might not be all that useful. I don't know. We'll see. Oh yeah, I remember talking about this. Okay, here we go. Just got some Discord comments here. Love to know what I do for the picture placeholders on my website. That is Gatsby plugin Sharp. Give that a look. It's a pretty cool plugin. I don't really do anything useful with that. That's just like, everybody asks me about this all the time, but yeah, it's just a library. For end-to-end testing, should I deploy an instance of the backend just for testing and make requests to it, or is there a better way? So most companies will have a staging environment that they deploy to before they deploy to production. And that's what I see most often is people would use their staging environment for the end-to-end tests. That's a pretty reasonable approach, and I've seen success with that. And then like you can run it locally as well. I know some setups are a little bit more complicated, like at PayPal. I never could run the entire PayPal app locally. That would be very complicated. I guess there's Docker, but I never got that set up when I was at PayPal. So yeah, like typically I've seen people have success with a staging environment, and you can run your own part of the app and just hit the staging environment if you wanted to run that locally, and then in CI it deploys to staging, and then you run all your tests on that. There are various ways to do this, but I think most often people will deploy an instance of the backend just for testing purposes, whether that be one that lives for everybody to use, which I don't typically recommend because then you can mess around with each other's data in ways that like mess things up bad. or if you can like spin up your whole backend before in an isolated environment that you can just use just for the testing purposes. So it kind of depends on your situation. If you can, I think that it's best if you put your whole app in a Docker container, and then you can just carry that around wherever you go, and you say, okay, spin this thing up, and I'll hit it with the with your end-to-end test suite. So great questions. Okay, so I think this one is going to, maybe going with the oldest ones might not be a good idea, because I think they may need a little bit more diving and digging and stuff. So recently updated maybe would be better. Sweet. Thoughts about next? I actually did answer this question, so I'm going to just skip that one. You can go look at it. It's kind of interesting. Oh yeah, an article suggestion. I remember seeing this one. The feature I was missing from button down. I can answer this. So the way that I have done my newsletter in like times past. Actually, let me back up a little bit. The reason that I created a newsletter in the first place was because I didn't trust Twitter to manage my audience and connect me with my audience effectively. Like most tweets are seen by 1% of my people who follow me. So it's not a great way to make sure I get a message out. Now, like things can go viral and you can, get a lot of attention for certain things, but I don't really control that. I'm at the whims of the algorithm. So that was when I decided to go and focus on collecting people's email addresses, because I have a much better click-through rate and everything. So anyway, I started with Tiny Letter, which is nope, I use this service all the time, Tiny PNG. It's awesome. But no, tinyletter.com, which is an awesome service. It's free, up to 5,000 subscribers, and it worked out great. But then I outgrew that and I switched over to Button Down. I think they're .email. Yeah. So Button Down, I like the person who works on it. It's like great person, and I like the service pretty well. But I had some stability issues and deliverability issues. Like it would take hours to send all the emails and stuff. I think maybe that has improved a little bit, but I don't know. It so it's pretty well featured. But then ConvertKit is what I switched over to, and ConvertKit is just out of this world on the amount of cool things that you can do with it. And now with ConvertKit, I use the sequences feature. And so what that means is when somebody signs up for my newsletter, they actually start at the very beginning of my sequence, and I have like 66 emails that they go through. So every week they get a new email. And I just make sure that the sequence is only useful information, like so people aren't seeing stuff like, oh man, this is like 2 years old, it's out of date, whatever. That's not the case with my content on there. If it's out of date, then I'll remove it or I'll update it. So anyway, ConvertKit has been awesome. I think that's probably one of the biggest. The other is I'm able to they expose an API for me to control my my subscribers really nicely. So yeah, let's see what else. It's just an awesome, super awesome service. Their deliverability is awesome, like in minutes or a minute, seconds. All of my 25,000 emails or more are sent, which is just awesome. So yep, that's that. I'll make sure to link that later. Okay, Josh asked a question in the Discord. Looking to develop a bit more outside my comfort zone and get more involved in the community, as I'm pretty new to the industry, having just got my first job in March. Congratulations. What a time to get your first job. My goodness, you barely slipped in before disaster struck on the world. So congratulations, Josh. Would you have any particular recommendations for how to keep on improving? I actually have a blog post about this. So let me share this. It is, man, I think I've got a couple. Let's see, it'll be under the career thing. So we've got intentional career building. There you go. That's a good one. Yeah, getting software experience. That's another really good one. I mean, gratitude is a good thing, but maybe not entirely applicable to your specific question. Conferences. COVID ruined conferences for me. That's okay. Yeah, increase your marketability. That one's pretty good. Yeah, getting noticed, widening your reach, also really good. So hopefully some of those can kind of help you. I'm not exactly sure what specifically you're looking for. Another thing that might be relevant to you is some of my open source stuff. And yeah, becoming an open source project maintainer. And then it is, yeah, what project should I contribute to? Also another really good one. So I've got a lot of stuff on my blog that should hopefully help you out. Okay, cool. Yeah, I should probably write a book. Just take all these blog posts and turn it into a book. And then I just share the one resource. I'm seeing somebody chatting here really quick, so I'm just gonna wait for a second to see that come in. Anybody in the Zoom that wants to ask anything?
Sure. This is sort of a similar question to one that you'd already answered in the AMA. Are you familiar with NX? What do you think of NX by Narwhal? I don't know how to pronounce it or anything.
Yeah. NX, I think it's right. I'm not sure either. So yeah, they actually approached me before they open sourced it because I was pretty big into the Angular world before coming into React. And now, of course, NX supports React as well. But yeah, it's cool. Actually, here, I'll share my screen again, just so I can navigate to the site so people know what we're talking about. NX Narwhal, it's whatever, blah, 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 blah. NX, where is NX? There we go. NX dev, there we go. So yeah, it's specifically catered toward enterprise software, companies. Yeah, so they approached me and like gave me a demo. I was like, hey, that looks interesting and cool. At the time I was at PayPal, so you'd think that this would be something I'd be like, oh, sweet, this will solve so many problems. I wasn't super like into it, mostly because at the time it was very Angular focused. Like it was built on top of Angular stuff. And I was like, I mean, I can see how you can retrofit it to like sort of work for React projects, but like I don't want to use something that has to be retrofitted. And so that was the feedback that I gave them. And I think that they've like revamped everything. So there's nothing Angular specific about it anymore, which is cool. That it supports, whatever. It's interesting that on their homepage, they're talking specifically, okay, we've got Angular there, React there. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so like it seems interesting. I don't have any use cases for it now, so I'm not going to dive in any deeper than I have, which is pretty much not a lot. I do know that they, at least a year ago, they were talking with me about using testing library as the de facto standard or as the built-in solution for testing. And I think that is the case for the React side, but the Angular side is still old. And that's what they wanted to talk with me about, was like, hey, let's get testing library. Like, tell us about testing library for Angular. So I hope that they start doing that. But yeah, it's still like, as far as I know, it's still using Karma and the other Angular stuff that's kind of dated. And yeah, those are my thoughts on NX. Seems cool. Probably something to look into if you want to do mono repo stuff. Yeah, but that's as far as I get into it.
Cool,
yeah, sure. Mo just sent me a message asking if I would answer this. I didn't even notice this. Okay, so this is yesterday, huh? Looking at the Bookshelf app and noticed a pretty cool component. Wondering if this is considered a queue design pattern. Well, let's see. I'm not sure what a queue design pattern is. I don't know if I would consider this a pattern. I mean, maybe it's a thing and I just stumbled on it, but I'll explain it here in a second once I finish reading the question. Would it make sense to use a proxy instead of set interval to watch for changes? Yeah, I can talk about that too. Performance, memory leaks, probably. Yeah, okay, I can talk about this. So this is part of my Epic React material. So if you want to actually watch me build this, then give me your name and email right there, and you'll be notified of when this is available for public access. It's really great, and I teach you how to write this and why I wrote it the way I did, but I'll explain it briefly. So this profiler component is actually just a small abstraction on top of the React profiler component, which is basically React's mechanism for performance monitoring in production. And here, let me bump that up so everybody can see that. Okay. So yeah, it's actually a pretty simple API. React profiler, you have an onRender, and then you pass out a function that accepts a bunch of prompts. I sure wish that were an object, because now I have to map this to an object myself, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. And it doesn't give you a ton of time, but it does give you a little bit of or enough information for you to identify spikes when you ship something that is a regression on performance perspective. And yeah, so like it's calling this function, but I actually want to send that to a backend somewhere, like, so I can store that in a time series database, do graphs and that sort of thing. So what I do, like, the problem is that React re-renders many times. Anytime the user interacts, React re-renders multiple times. And so if I sent an individual network request for every single one of those re-renders, then I'd be sending potentially a lot of network requests, especially for something that, like, think of a drag and drop UI where I'm dragging and dropping, and that's firing off a bunch of set states because of where things go or whatever. So yeah, potentially a lot of re-renders could be triggered. And so I don't want to send a network request for every one of those. So instead I batch them up, all of these different reports, and then I send them all together as an array of all those network requests. And you can actually see this working if you go to bookshelf.lol and go to the network tab. And after 5 seconds, you'll see a network request to profile. And you can take a look at all of the data that we sent, which is, it's not a lot, but it's not a little either. And if I like do a whole bunch of interactions, and let's do that, and let's do that, and now let's type, yeah, just a bunch of interactions. There are going to be multiple re-renders that happen. And so like we just batch them all up together. And yeah, so that's the use case that I've got here is to batch these things up. Now, the specific mechanism that I am using is a set interval, because this is, like, to me, this is really simple. We just have a queue, and we have this function that takes that queue. And if that queue, if there's nothing in it, then we just, don't even bother making a network request, and we'll just pretend we did. But if there is something, then we're going to make a queue to send. We'll reassign our queue to an empty array so that the next time around, like, we're not sending the same things every time. And then we'll make a client HTTP request to the profile endpoint with our queue as the data. And then because we have this in an interval, that'll just happen every 5 seconds. And running this code every 5 seconds is like never going to cause a problem for anybody. Like, maybe the process of converting this queue to send into JSON, like, if I have a ton of stuff in there, like, that potentially could be a bit of a problem, maybe, but I don't think so. I think would probably be okay. And in addition, at Facebook, they actually disable performance monitoring and only enable it for like a tiny fraction of their users. And so they, like, most users will not be doing any sort of performance profiling of any kind, which is kind of an interesting thing. So yeah, as far as the proxy would be interesting. So this would, I don't really think that this would be a good solution. So basically, I'm guessing that the reason proxy came up for this is like, well, once I add something to the queue, let's just automatically send it. And that wouldn't be any better than just sending it right here rather than adding it to a queue. So I don't really see any reason to use a proxy for this kind of thing. Even though proxies are kind of interesting. Yeah, interesting pieces of tech. So hopefully that was Good answer to your question, Mo. Thanks for asking.
So Kent,
Yeah.
How would React Query fit into that type of possible situation?
So like, are you saying maybe I could use React Query to do this reporting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So React Query, I could absolutely. This would be a mutation, and I could say use mutation. And there are some benefits, like I could get automatic retries, and a couple of things like that. The thing is, for this specific case, I actually don't care about the promise that's returned. This is a fire and forget sort of thing. And so I don't need to worry about managing the state of the promise. Like, is it loading? Like, I'm not showing a loading spinner or anything. And for that reason, there's actually not a lot of logic in here that React Query could clean up. Yeah, that's why I'm just hitting the client directly. Cool. All right. Any other questions before I switch back over to the AMA? All right, sweet. So let's get over to this AMA thing. Trying to find a video I saw 2 or 3 years ago. Ah, man. I'll answer that later, I guess. Oh yeah, how to test outside click using React Testing Library. Somebody asked me this on Twitter a while ago, and I was like, I don't think I've ever tested that. Nope, I have actually. Downshift has stuff like this. Let's see. Tests. Let's see. Boy, yeah, this is gonna be hard to find this. Maybe it's in miscellaneous. It could be in menu props. Yeah, let's just see if I can find this really quick. So downshift, for those of you who are not familiar, is a library that I wrote years ago for an autocomplete type of UI. Here, let's try outside, or maybe, yeah, reset. Oh, that's a Cypress test. Okay, well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, touch outside for coverage. That might be it. That might be interesting. Yeah, and then I actually handed this off to someone else to maintain, and they've been doing a stellar job. This person right here, Sylview. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but doing a great job. So here's the Cypress test for this. Does not reset input when mouse up outside while the input is focused. That's probably not quite what we're looking for. Yep, there you go. So here is a way to do this using Cypress and Cypress Testing Library. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I didn't actually write those, so it's kind of fun. Let me find outside right here. Mouse down and up on outside, the autocomplete. Let's see. So we open the menu. This should be rewritten to use user event one day, maybe. One day it will. I won't work on that. But anybody watching this can. Okay, so we mouse down within the autocomplete node. So we mouse down and up on the input, and then mouse down and up outside, so just on the document body. And we expect the handle state change to have been called times once. So our state, there was something that triggered a state change. Probably could have some better assertions here for like what that state change actually was. But yeah, that's basically, this is how you would accomplish this. And you could actually get this better by using user event and user event.click. So you'd say user event.click input, user event.click document body. And that is how you could test clicking outside. Potentially, you could also like create another DOM node, like another div that you just append to the body. Or maybe the thing that you render would render a div alongside the component that you're testing, and then you can click on that div or maybe it could be an input or a button or something. That would be another way. But like taking it all steps back, we just say, how would a user do the thing that you're trying to test? Make your test do that thing. That's basically, that's what you do. Hopefully that is sort of useful. I'm going to copy this and paste this right over here. And then I'll paste a link to the live stream later. See if we can find another outside thing here. No, that's probably not it. Not in there. Okay, cool. So hopefully that was interesting. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm just going to go on to the next one if nobody else has another question or anything. My opinion of ClojureScript. Yeah, so I can speak to this. I've never used ClojureScript, so my opinion doesn't matter. So there's that. But more specifically, the reason I haven't looked into ClojureScript is because for the same reason that I haven't looked too far into Elm or Reason or like name 30 other Rust. Like I only have so much time in a day, and I find that I'm most effective by focusing all of my energies on JavaScript. I don't ignore things. Like I know some things about ClojureScript, but I have just decided to focus everything on JavaScript. And I realize that, yeah, ClojureScript does allow you to use React components. Reason, there's also Reason React. That's very interesting. But I have to have a pretty strong reason to divert again away from what I'm focusing on. And yeah, I think that the next upgrade for me beyond JavaScript and React will be like telling AI to do my job for me or something. Like I really feel like React will continue to evolve until the next big thing comes, which will probably be computers just writing stuff for us. I don't know. Nobody can tell the future, but right now React is rocking it, and I'm rocking it with React. So that's ClojureScript. Seems cool. If you're into it, I love it. That's great.
Kent, got a question in Discord.
Oh, sweet. Sorry, I hid that back here. Let me find your question. Thank you. Is there the existence of libraries such as React Query, GraphQL, Apollo will be less used? Okay, so I think that naturally you don't typically use Apollo with React Query, right? They're kind of replacements of each other. You use one or the other. And so therefore, just by a natural process of zero-sum game, I guess, it means that if I'm using React Query, I'm less likely to use Apollo. Now, I think that like there are absolutely plenty of people using React Query with GraphQL backends, but I think most people using React Query are not doing GraphQL, and so in that sense, they are kind of in a different market. Like if I'm not using GraphQL, there's no way I'm using Apollo, right? Like it just wouldn't make sense. I mean, I think it's possible you can do like front-end resolvers and stuff like that, but it's very unlikely that I would bring in Apollo if my backend wasn't GraphQL. So React Query isn't like totally reaching into Apollo's user base and grabbing people off of that, because React Query is primarily, I think, most people are using it with REST backends, even though you can actually use it with Apollo. For me personally, Apollo is pretty complex. It adds a fair amount of complexity to your code base. At least in what I've observed and what people have told me. So like, I could be wrong. Like maybe you disagree. That's your prerogative. But because that's the way that I feel about it, if I had a GraphQL endpoint to consume in a product, then I would probably reach for GraphQL request, the node module called GraphQL request, and React Query. And I put those things together to have what I think would be a simpler solution to this kind of thing. Now, Apollo, like it's not just the client library. There's so much more that you get by using Apollo, but it's also just enormous because it depends on the GraphQL module directly. And that module is just huge too. So it's kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, we're going all in on Apollo. And I would say that it's just as intrusive on your code base as React is. Like if you decide one day we're not going to use Apollo anymore, that's basically like saying we're not going to use React anymore. I mean, that's the level of impact it will have. You'll have to change a lot of your code to migrate away from Apollo. And probably the same could be said of React Query, mostly. Though React Query, like the idiomatic use case is to make hooks around the query hooks. And so in like throughout your code base, you're actually using your custom hooks rather than the library directly, which would kind of tend to mean that you could migrate away from React Query by re-implementing those hooks away from React Query. So I think that maybe React Query is less intrusive or has a less presence on your code base than GraphQL and Apollo. But I kind of diverged from the original question. So to answer the question, yes, I think that fewer people will use Apollo because React Query exists, but that's like just because it's a good solution and it solves many of the same problems that Apollo solves for people. So yeah, kind of interesting question. Yeah, lots of boilerplate. Yeah, that's been my experience, my very limited experience. I've never actually used it. I evaluated it when I was at PayPal. So, but in my conversations and in my research, that was my, what I could tell. Yeah, and just like tons and tons of features, which are cool. So that's good. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot to do with familiarity as well. So that's cool. All right, good stuff. So I'm gonna just move this over so I don't miss anything. And let's go to the React profiler showing more commits, expected less. All right, so when profiling my component settings body, it's showing 15 commits. Let's see. Well, it's kind of hard for me to do something with something that's not actually running. So I don't know how useful I'm going to be, but I can take a look. Each text input component of a profile component committed at a different level. Yeah, that's, well, unless they say specifically. Yeah, so showing 15 commits, like when I do X is what I need. So I can't answer this question right now. That's too bad. Let me just take a look at this. Created a provider hook using your blog post about context. Somebody actually made a module that was basically my blog post implemented as a module. I feel like I've seen a couple of these actually, which is interesting. But cool. The thing is that I don't know how to test children components that use the provider hook. I would like to send an initial state to unit test various scenarios. I actually feel like there was some point where I showed how to write tests for this. Maybe it was in an office hours.
Does this involve creating like the mock like components that get passed into that provider? Because I believe the recipe is actually in the documentation for.
Yeah. So it's actually, and we don't even need to mock it either. It's so yeah, I think you're right. So React context right here was actually just recently updated, and the solution is actually like. So let's all take a step back and let's remember, whenever you're testing anything, the first question you ask is, how does the user end up running this code? Just make your test do that. And so how does the user run your consumer component? The user runs your consumer component because by rendering it within a provider component, right? The user being the developer. The developer user will wrap your thing in a provider. And so that's what, this doesn't look updated. This, I don't think this is updated. No, there's the wrapper. Yeah. So yeah, no, this is different. Oh no, that's right. They made a custom render thing. So yeah, this is what you do. No, they didn't use the wrapper API. Okay, something weird is going on. Let me show you the React testing React testing library course. And in here, I show this with Redux and with React Router. Applies the same to all of the things. So here we make a custom render. We accept any like potential options, and I'm actually going to be updating this. There are a couple changes that I'm going to be making to this in pretty near future. Like in particular, I don't see any reason to return the history. I actually also don't see a reason to create a memory history. So maybe a better example would be the bookshelf, because that's the most up-to-date thing. I promise that I'll give you set up. No, it's in the test directory. I'll give you the links to these things, and as I'm jumping around, I won't give you the things that I am showing you that I don't think you should do. Yeah, so here's the custom render for the bookshelf app. It takes a route, takes a user. If that user's not been defined, then we'll actually create a user for you so that you can go to this route as an authenticated user. If you don't want to be an authenticated user when you go to this route, then you set user to null. And so now you're not authenticated. But yeah, then we push state to the route. So we go to the list page by default. And then we say, okay, let's render this UI that you're giving us. This is basically like React Testing Library's render function. You pass that UI to RTL render along with a wrapper. And so that's our app providers right here. This is literally what our app is rendering. This is the exact same thing that is rendered in our app. We have our React query config, the router, the auth provider, all the literal actual things that we're doing. And that ends up working super nicely. So we don't have to render the entire app. You can render just a piece of it, but it will be wrapped within the actual providers that your application is going to be wrapped in, which is where you get a lot of confidence. So yeah, that's how I would recommend testing really anything with context. So yeah, good luck with that. Let me share this really quick. And again, this is part of Epic React. I will teach you how to build this if you want to actually learn it and watch it, and it's awesome. Oh my gosh, I can't wait for you all to see this. It's so great. Okay, good stuff. So let's see, 2 questions from Mo. Great. What are your thoughts on BitDev, and what's the best way to build and test components? Okay, let's take a look at BitDev. I've never seen this before, so this is like an unboxing. Whoa, what is this? Okay, that's interesting. Is this like a demo? Whoa. Okay, let's figure out what this thing is. Better way to build modern components. Bit is a scalable and collaborative way to build it and reuse components. It's everything you need for local development, cross. Try it out for free. I don't understand what it is. And this thing is freaking me out. What is this?
Is it like Storybook components as a service?
I don't know. I'm just
so basically I think you can build components, publish them, and then other developers can, download them and use them. So basically you build piece by piece in a way.
Isn't there like a UX service that does that too? Like people build like UI and UX like
Storybook?
things. No, where they could sell them. Oh man, what is that called? I'll find it.
Huh, interesting. Well, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever use this. But maybe our AI overlords will. I don't know. I don't like, is this basically is NPM, right? Like people build things and then other people can use them.
Yep.
Basically,
they would rather that you pay them for a private bit to then pay NPM. So yeah, it's a direct replacement.
I see. Okay. Well, cool. Well, if people use it and they like it, then that's their prerogative. I don't think I would use it personally, but cool. Interesting. Thanks for sharing. And And the best way to build and test components that are shared, used by both React and React Native. So my disclaimer that I always give when people ask me React Native questions is I've never built anything with React Native. I did a hello world with the, what is it, Snack.io, with the Expo thing. Is that what it's called, Snack? It's pretty legit, actually, really cool. Maybe that thing doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, so I did like a hello world and popped it up on my phone. I was like, oh, wow, I just said hello world. And then I changed my name and changed it to Kent. And it was like, hello, Kent. Cool. And that's my experience with React Native. So not a lot. Yeah, so as far as testing things that are shared between them, if I were tasked with this today, then I would test, if it works with both React and React Native, then I would 100% test the DOM side of it. Sorry, if it works with React DOM and React Native, then yeah, I would test the DOM side and just hope the native side worked. But that's just because of my background in the DOM. That's just where I do everything. Luckily, we also have React Native testing library, and it's awesome. So you can take a look at using that if you want to focus on the native side. You can't really use these tests for both. You can't say, okay, write the test and then run it with native, run it with DOM, because they are close. This is like a write or learn once, write anywhere type of thing, similar to React Native, where yeah, you can find success in learning how the APIs work, but you can't actually run the same code. So I think most of the time, though, the shared code is going to be in hooks. So like custom hooks, that would make sense to me. And so with custom hooks, you can actually use React Hooks testing library, and that would be a pretty effective way to test this, stuff like that. So some thoughts, not entirely experienced, based on my own experience. So sorry, my usefulness is a little limited there. Yeah, UI kits, they're the future and the past. And people always want to make money building stuff, which makes total sense. Okay, cool. Feel free to ping me with other questions. I've still got, oh, wow, 12 minutes. This time it's flown. But yeah, feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to keep on rolling through these things. Duplicating code for act warnings and integration tests. Act warnings. At least they've read this blog post, so that's good. Yeah, so we've got a session timeout thing. Yeah, okay. So there's an extra dot there. I wonder what that's all about. Maybe it's an artifact of the way they wrote this. Nope. Okay, well, while I'm here, I'll just fix that really quick. Okay, so yeah, so they are using fake timers, which is what you would want to do with something like this. So wait for the timer notification, then advance, and then wait for the timer text. Oh, I see. So it's this whole thing is what has to be done in every single test, and that's annoying. Now finding that every integration test already now needs to include the session timeout assertion. Huh. I wonder why that is. So I'm not sure I understand why you have to wait the 10 minutes. Like, why do you have to advance the timers by that 10 minutes? Yeah, I'm not sure I understand why this is necessary, but let's assume that it was. You can put this logic inside of a single function, then just call that function. and I wouldn't really be too concerned about it. I'm still, it's unclear to me why this is necessary at all in your test. Like maybe you have one test that makes sure that 10-minute time works as expected, that after 10 minutes it has a warning or whatever. Just one test for that. And then for the rest of them, you're clearly going to go through the forms faster than 10 minutes. So I don't think that you would need to worry about that. So yeah, feel free to comment if I misunderstood the question, but that is my thought on that. And I will link up to this recording later.
Well, based off of like a presumption of that say it's a modal that pops up, that notification, and it automatically closes after a certain amount of time, then the person is only testing one particular state, which is that it's timed out and auto closed each time, rather than like the different states of like the user maybe closed the modal.
Yeah, you'll definitely want to cover those different use cases, like what to test. Yeah, how to know what to test, where I talk about use case coverage, which is great. So yeah, that'd be a use case to think of for sure. Okay, cool. So Brian, any additional questions on Discord or in the video? I will answer another AMA question here. Null versus empty fragment. In React, if you want to render nothing, either you can return null from the component or you can render an empty fragment. I've actually never rendered an empty fragment. I've always just returned null for that particular use case. But the question is there any disadvantage of using React Fragment over null? What are your thoughts? I think using React Fragment is more explicit and shows a developer's intent. I'm going to just type this out because it's pretty simple. I don't want them to have to search around the video for my answer. I don't think there's any real observable difference here. So given that it's all about your preference, and for me, I prefer to return or to render null when I want nothing rendered. Fragments are intended to encapsulate children. And if I saw an empty fragment, I would be confused why it's there.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I would add on that as well. If you actually take a Babel transpile of a React.fragment, it is a create element that is basically passing in null for a tag for an element and consumes children. And if you pass in null, you're basically getting absolutely nothing. There's no create element.
Really?
I believe so.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. That's interesting. So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So what do I need to do?
Oh, just create fragments. It should have something that shows the React.create element render.
And we pass the fragment, and then null is going to be the this one is the props argument. So we don't have any props. If I were to add like a key, actually we'd have to do React fragment. So I can pass props. If we did key, then we'll get an object here. So it is technically it's going to render the fragment, but React doesn't do anything with it because it has no children. So if we were like counting bits, then rendering null would probably be faster. But we're not counting bits because that's stupid. And so, or let me say that differently. That's for Rust programmers. And like, when you get close to the machine, for us UI developers, we can waste bits all we want. Who cares? Let the Chrome developers and everybody optimize our bad code.
Yeah. Try assigning something to null. See if Babel what Babel does with that.
It'll just assign it to null. Yeah.
There you go.
What if you do a self-closing fragment?
Yeah, so we could do
Hmm.
that. It'll just give null as the prompts position. Now, where things get really interesting is, what if I want a self-closing syntax fragment thing, right? That's not possible. There's no self-closing fragment with whatever that syntax sugar is. So that doesn't work. That's too bad. Yeah, it's very odd to me to render a fragment without children. That would be odd to me.
Agreed.
Kevin says my typing is really silent. That's because I use this thing. Yeah, I've had this thing forever. And you know what? I'm actually noticing over the last like year, and it's gotten worse over the last couple weeks, but my wrists are starting to not like this. So I think I might need to get an ergonomic keyboard. I've tried it in the past. I hate them. But you know, it's a familiarity thing probably. Okay, we're wrapping up pretty soon. Let me just double check over here. So Idris is asking, I don't know if I can ask code question here, but recently have transformed a class component to a function one. Good. And this component has a child component, which is a class right now, which is fine. I passed some functions from the parent to the child, and these functions use some state variables from the parent. Sure. Before everything worked properly, but now it is giving me those variables undefined. Yeah, I think I'd need to look at the code specifically to get an idea of what might be causing that, because there really shouldn't be anything. Yeah, nothing should have really changed. Yeah, I can't think of any reason off the top of my head, but I don't doubt you, but I need to see some code. And because we're pretty much out of time, feel free to ask that in the help channel, giving some code. And we've got just such an awesome community that is happy to be of assistance. Okay, thoughts on jest coverage. I try to test all my function components. As a reminder, since I see this twice, it's not functional component, it is function component. All components are functional, unless they don't work, and then they're dysfunctional. I never liked, everybody called it functional components, the TypeScript definitions, they decided to call them functional components. It's so weird to me. They're not functional components. It's just function components. It's not just you, Xavier, don't worry, it's fine. Function components that do a specific thing on render, or render a specific thing, but the components that are parents like pages are hard to test, and I don't know if test with Cypress is more valuable than unit tests. Yeah. Okay, so trying to think of the which of the 30,000 resources that I have would be best. So here's one for sure that's useful. Right, tests. Not too many, mostly integration. So it does take a bit of work to get integration tests. Like this is true. They are hard to test, but the fact is that you need to make sure that Josh, yes, I love rickrolling people. That's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, so eventually you do want to test the integration of your components. Otherwise, you're going to be in a hard place. And so given that you eventually want to test the integration, you're going to have to do that work of setting up things so that you can test these parent components. Given that you're going to have to put the work in anyway, you can leverage that work on all of your tests. And so this is where that blog post that I mentioned earlier, and I will paste it again. Where this comes in, where we focus on these integration tests because they will give us the most bang for our buck, but we can't just focus entirely on integration or end-to-end either. And the metaphor that I really like that I got from JB Rainsberger is you can throw paint against a wall and eventually you might get most of the wall, but until you go up to the wall with a brush, you'll never get the corners. Then you just imagine that you take a bucket of paint and throw it against the wall. now, like if you don't care about the floor or the ceiling or like the pictures on the wall, then that's fine. But normally you do. And so like, yeah, you can tape it all up and whatever, take a lot of effort to do that. But it probably is just easier to, you know, go ahead and throw the bucket of paint against the area of the wall that's just like all by itself. And then get a paint roller for most of everything else. And then you get a little paintbrush around that like ancient artifact that you found on an expedition or whatever. You don't want to get paint on that. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of the way that I think about it. And that big paint roller is what you're going to be using most of the time, and that's your integration test. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question. What do you think about passing children as an object? I mean, you can do that, like make a component that implements that sort of thing. We used to do render props. That was a big thing. This is kind of like, you know, if I were writing a component right now and I wanted to do this kind of scoped slots thing, this is very popular in the Vue world. We had transclusion back with Angular JS. That was fun, a fun made up word. But if I were to implement a component that did this, then I would just have this be header is my header thing, whatever, and body and footer. I don't see any value in changing, like making the API very complicated. I would just do that. Yeah. It seems simple enough to me. And then you don't have to explain to people why you're abusing the child or the children prop. So, yeah, don't worry, Idris and Xavier, the functional component thing, everybody calls them functional components. I don't think the React docs ever called them functional components, but like everybody else around the React community called them functional components, and I just never understood it. So anyway, my boys are knocking on my window, and it is 5:02 my time, so I got to wrap this thing up. If there's any last questions really quick, I'm going to go tell my kids to stop knocking, and then I can answer them. Hi. How are you? Did you find the blue ball? Let me think about it. I'm on a call right now.
And so, because it's not a school night for me.
That's true. It's not.
You can come with me because I don't.
Yeah, I can understand that. Can you not put that in your mouth? Spit it out, please.
We got the treasure box.
Cool. Okay, I'll see you later. I have a walkout basement, and so like my window is like right at their level where they can stand and like look right in, and it's fun. I enjoy it. I'd rather get interrupted by my children at home than by coworkers at work. So I always, yeah, I love that. Okay, cool. That's it for me. Thanks for hanging out. It was a good time. Hopefully it was interesting for you all. I'm going to wrap this up. So yeah, to wrap things up, you can come to kcd.im/office hours and you can get this added to your calendar. This includes like the Zoom link in there too and stuff. So you never have to worry about missing that. So feel free to add this to your calendar. You don't have to come. But if you're like, oh yeah, I was struggling with this problem, then can we? Then yeah, please feel free to join in. If you want to be notified when the office hours begins, then go to the bots only channel and you can opt in. I'll show you that right now. So if we go other bots only, there you go. You just say ? And that that will add you to a role, which I notify when I start office hours. So if that's the way you want to do it, then that is cool too. And then you can always go to my YouTube channel to watch these streams after the fact. I think this Zoom thing is working pretty well. It's not as awesome quality as what I had before, where I'd like be the little face in the corner and stuff, but I actually like having people in the Zoom with me. It's more fun this way. So thanks for hanging out. And then, yeah, don't forget to sign up for Epic React because it's coming and I can't wait. Oh, fun thing really quick. I just added this to the bottom of my all my React posts. So now you can see the countdown timer right there. you can click the blast off button and it'll take you here and you can see the countdown timer here too, if that's what you want to do. I also started blogging on here. So if you didn't see that, Why I Love React on here, it's a pretty good one. If you want a link to that, just go to my Twitter. I have retweeted it a bunch. I'll just put it in the Discord here too. That was a pretty good post. Feel pretty good about that. So yeah, anyway, looking forward to all kinds of fun things. And I'll see you all around on the internet. Thanks for hanging out. Peace. Oh, that was a flip off. I mean, peace. I forget, like in the United States, it doesn't matter which way you do this, but yeah, V out. There you go. Bye.